How many of you actually feel stressed during the holiday as opposed to peace and actually enjoying the time with your family, where you feel like there's just so much pressure to get so much done and attend so many family gatherings where you can't really enjoy your time, where relaxing just doesn't happen with family gatherings for you? Today we're going to be talking about the stress that comes with the holiday season and how to effectively set boundaries with family, which can be very difficult to do, especially when there's just so much to get done and so many people to see, and you're feeling all of this pressure from everybody around you. We'll talk today about just some signs that maybe some boundaries need to be put up more, maybe that you're reaching your limits, and ways to actually set those limits. But first, if you want to see more videos like this and you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe and like this video. And leave a comment down below with some boundaries that maybe you struggle with or ways that you set limits with your family. All right, let's get into the video. So like I said, with the holidays, it can get very chaotic, very overwhelming rather quickly, and before you know it, you might be feeling very drained and overwhelmed with family gatherings, with family events, where you just feel so much pressure around you to maybe act a certain way or engage with certain people or do certain things, and that could be a lot. So when it comes to setting boundaries with your family, you need to identify first what your limits actually are, and boundaries can have many different areas to even look at in your life when figuring out what your limits are. For example, you can have time boundaries where you focus your boundaries around the time actually spent with people. You can have emotional boundaries where the focus is around certain harmful conversations you have with people or when people overstep. You can have physical boundaries, like physical space away from people. There's a bunch of different types of boundaries that you can focus on. And like this video, or actually add a comment down below if you'd like me to make a separate video on just the types of boundaries that you should be focusing on just in everyday life when figuring out what your limits are. Because that's really important to look at, because you can't really set limits when you don't really know what your own boundaries are. So let me actually give some examples of this just so you can have a clearer understanding of what boundaries might look like. So if you're feeling drained and exhausted after particular family events, that might be a sign that a time boundary needs to come in. So maybe some breaks, shorter time interacting, really having some time limits set in place so you're not reaching your limit and then continuing to interact with people. Another sign that maybe you're exceeding your limits is if you experience physical sensations like headaches or pain or tension throughout the body. These are ways that the body lets us know that, maybe we've reached our limit with stress, we need a break, we need to take some time to ourselves. This can also happen if you feel a little bit spacey or out of it, or even checked out, honestly, sometimes. A lot of people do feel checked out at family gatherings, so that's a very clear sign that maybe your boundaries are being crossed and you need to take some time to yourself. If you're dreading certain family events or gatherings, that could also be a sign that maybe a boundary needs to be put in place. This could look like limiting your exposure to that family gathering or planning ahead of time some responses that you can use during those family gatherings. And then another sign could be once the gathering's over, just feeling so overwhelmed and exhausted, and you might have difficulty sleeping. These could be signs of being overstimulated, and this could mean that maybe some boundaries needed to be put in place earlier, or maybe the length of the event needs to be adjusted. It could even mean the type of event needs to be changed. So these are just some things to be aware of when you're interacting with your family and you're noticing some of these signs coming up. You can even reflect on past holidays and just think, what was I feeling during this event? Did I have any tension after this event? Did I have trouble sleeping? Do I tend to have trouble maintaining conversation with my family members? These are all like little clues to give you a sense of what your boundaries even are during the holidays. So one of the biggest ways that you can enforce your boundaries, and one of the most important ways, is saying no without feeling guilty. This is something that so many people struggle with, including myself. It's not easy to say no without feeling bad or feeling guilty or feeling like you don't have a right to set your own boundaries. But the more that you say yes, the more you give in, the more you cross your own boundaries, it's only going to lead to further exhaustion, further stress, and actually negatively impact your relationships with other people. You should never feel bad for protecting your own peace and protecting your own well-being, because you you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So you can't really give your best self to others when you're not even feeling your best yourself, if that makes any sense. It allows you to be more at peace and not feel so burnt out so that you can actually enjoy your interactions with other people. A lot of people might need to hear this, but it is not your responsibility to meet everyone else's expectations. Your worth is not defined by how much you do for other people. It's not defined by how much you give to other people or how many times you say yes to other people. You need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and that you are respecting your own boundaries. And once you do that, then other people will begin to respect them as well. And this will actually lead to healthier relationships in the long run because you're setting that expectation for mutual respect and honesty. By doing this, you can just start small with saying no to something that's not like a big deal. And it doesn't always have to be no. You can set limits to where your line is that you don't want to be crossed. It also doesn't have to come off as rude or mean. And I know a lot of people out there feel like they're just being inherently mean by saying no, but that's not the case. You're just communicating what you need, which might feel a little bit weird at first, but it's very important. Now, sometimes you might need to be a little bit more stern with people who tend to push your limits and disrespect your boundaries. But if you're just starting to set your boundaries with other people, you can word it in ways such as, I really appreciate this, but blah, 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 blah. Or I really love this idea, but I'm going to blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is. You can highlight the positives of the situation while also bringing in your limits. Something that can be really helpful that you can put into place as well is some sort of self-care escape plan. This could be when you need to get away rather quickly and practice some sort of self-care routine that really helps you feel more grounded and recharged to then maybe go back to your family gathering. This can be really effective if you already have it planned out. For example, if you have like 2 or 3 self-care practices that are already ready for you, waiting for when you need a break from your family gathering or event. You can also plan these breaks. So after an hour, you can tell yourself, I'm going to take some time away for about 10-15 minutes, do my self-care activity, and then go back to spending time with my family. And this doesn't have to be complicated. It can be pretty simple. Like it can look like just getting some fresh air, stepping outside for a minute, maybe listening to a calming playlist, a music playlist. It can look like having a warm cup of tea just by yourself for a minute. Anything that makes you feel a bit more at peace. Sometimes it can be really difficult for family members to fully understand why you're setting the boundaries that you are. The holidays are so focused around overextending ourselves to other people or spending as much time with family as possible. Like there's all these pressures going around. So when you start setting your boundaries, your family members might not understand or might be a little bit thrown off as to why you'd want to be spending less time with them or take breaks from them. This is why clear communication is so important when it comes to setting your limits. When you're setting expectations, it's really important that you consider setting them ahead of time to avoid any surprises. So to avoid any sort of arguments or disagreements, it may help you to just put it out there in the open ahead of time or in the beginning of the event so that you're not just springing it on your family halfway through or toward the end that this is where your limit is. This kind of helps them prepare and be aware of what your boundaries are without feeling kind of thrown off themselves. One example of this could be, hey, I'm going to be staying for dinner, but once dessert comes, I think I'm going to head home. And again, also go in with the expectation that people will not always be happy about the boundaries that you're setting. So go in with that expectation of they might not like this boundary, but I need to enforce it anyway. It is okay if they don't like it. And finally, one more thing to keep in mind is if you have a support system, like if you're going to family events with friends or you're spending time with family with your partner, let them in on what your boundaries are. Like have that discussion beforehand so they can support you in setting these boundaries and limits with everybody else. You can even have a code signal or word letting your friends or your partner know that, hey, like I'm reaching my limits. We need to maybe take a break or leave or do something so I'm not feeling so overstimulated in this moment. It's nice to have someone else there who's on your side to actually help you set these boundaries. Like even just saying no in some sort of way that you choose can help when someone else is saying that as well, who's on your side. So I hope these tips help you. Just keep in mind that you have full right to set whatever limits you need to during the holidays. There's so much emphasis on everybody else during the holidays and making everybody else happy, but do not forget about yourself. You deserve to be happy as well during the holidays. You deserve to enjoy the holidays just as much as everybody else, and you deserve to have your peace protected so that you're not overextending yourself and feeling burnt out, because that's not what we want to feel during the holidays, is burnt out. We want to actually enjoy time with family. We want to actually enjoy this time of the year and this season, and really focus on what it's all about without feeling like you're just drained. Thank you all so much for joining me for today's video. I hope you all are enjoying the beginning of December, and I will see you next time. Bye.